HOA versus bull. The letter arrived on thick cream-colored paper, the kind that felt expensive and foreboding. Alara read it twice, her calloused fingers leaving faint smudges on the pristine surface. "Dear resident of the Oak Creek Valley," it began, as if they were all living in tidy condominiums, pursuant to the newly ratified Oak Creek Valley Community Covenant. Section 12, Paragraph 4. All properties falling within the designated geographical boundaries are hereby subject to the rules and regulations of the Oak Creek Valley Homeowners Association. Alara stopped reading and looked out her kitchen window. The view wasn't of a manicured lawn or a community pool. It was of 50 acres of rolling Pennsylvania pasture, a weathered red barn, and a herd of black Angus cattle grazing peacefully under a wide open sky. The Buckley farm had been in her family for 4 generations. Her great-grandfather had bought the land when the only association around was a congregation of crows in the oak trees. The designated geographical boundaries, she knew, were the brainchild of Brenda Lansing. Brenda had moved into the enclave at Oak Creek, a new development of $500,000 homes carved out of the old Henderson place next door, about 3 years ago. She'd been elected HOA president 6 months later, and her reign had been one of escalating militant tidiness. Alara had ignored the first few polite notes about unsightly agricultural equipment and potential odor nuisances. But this was different. This was a claim of jurisdiction. Her husband Tom, a man of few words and deep roots, just grunted when she showed him the letter. "Tell her to pound sand L. That woman's got a stick so far up her, I'll handle it." "Tom," Alara said, her voice calm, but her jaw set. She had a feeling pounding sand wouldn't work on Brenda Lansing. Her first attempt was a phone call. "Ms. Lansing," Alara began, trying for diplomacy. "There's been a mistake. The Buckley farm is not, and has never been, part of any homeowners association." Brenda's voice was as crisp and synthetic as the polyester blend of her favorite tennis skirt. "Alara dear, the covenants are quite clear. The valley, in its entirety, is the community. Your property is within the valley. Therefore, it falls under the association's purview. We have standards to uphold, property values to protect." "From what?" Alara asked, incredulous. "From cows, from hay bales, from visual clutter and non-conforming land use," Brenda recited. "Your livestock is a particular concern. The new Rule 14B clearly states that all exterior pets must be leashed or contained within a fenced yard not exceeding 4 feet in height." Alara stared at the phone, speechless. "They're not pets, Brenda. They're a herd, a business, and a 4-foot fence wouldn't hold a determined rabbit, let alone a 1,500-pound steer. Then I suggest you look into rehoming them," Brenda said sweetly. "The first compliance inspection is scheduled for next Tuesday. I'll be by at 10. Do try to have the manure piles cleared, dear. The smell is simply agrarian." The line went dead. Elara felt a hot, slow anger burn in her chest, the kind her grandfather used to say could season cast iron. Brenda Lansing prepared for the inspection as if for war. She wore a spotless white blouse, khaki capris, and pristine sneakers. In her hands, she carried a leather-bound clipboard with the HOA seal embossed in gold, a checklist of violations already half filled, and a tape measure, her weapon of choice. She parked her white Lexus SUV at the end of the Buckley's long gravel driveway, unwilling to risk the pebbles chipping her paint. The air smelled of damp earth, clover, and, yes, manure. Brenda wrinkled her nose, applying a dab of peppermint oil to her upper lip. It was 10 o'clock on the dot. She marched up the drive, her sneakers crunching on the gravel. The farmhouse itself was a violation, peeling paint on the shutters, an unapproved shade of robin's egg blue. The porch held a collection of mismatched rocking chairs, clutter, and a worn-out welcome mat unsightly. She began scribbling notes. Elara emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a rag. She wore faded jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt. She didn't smile, Elara. Brenda didn't look up from her clipboard. Violation A1, unapproved exterior paint color. A2, porch clutter. A3, faded non-decorative doormat. We'll proceed to the outbuildings. This is ridiculous, Elara said, her voice low. You have no authority here. On the contrary, Brenda chirped, finally meeting Elara's gaze. Her eyes were the color of a shallow pond. Authority is derived from the covenant which you, as a property owner in the valley, are bound by. Now, shall we? She gestured with her clipboard toward the barn. Elara crossed her arms. Be my guest, but watch your step. It's a farm, not a showroom. Brenda's inspection of the barn was a symphony of disapproving clicks and scribbles. The tractor was parked in an undesignated area. The hay bales were improperly stacked and presenting a fire hazard. The old wooden barrels by the tack room were unsecured debris, but her real prize was the fencing. She marched up to the 3-strand barbed wire fence that separated the farmyard from the back 40 where the main herd grazed. Violation F1, she announced triumphantly. Perimeter fencing is of a non-conforming, hazardous material. Barbed wire is strictly prohibited. Furthermore, its height is grossly inadequate for proper containment. Rule 14b clearly states, Rule 14b is for poodles, Brenda, not cattle, Elara interrupted, her patience fraying. That fence has held my family's herd for 80 years. It's a lawsuit waiting to happen, Brenda retorted, pulling out her tape measure. She stretched it against a fence post, and as I suspected, the posts are uneven, a clear eyesore. This will all need to be replaced with a white vinyl fence no more than 4 feet high as per community guidelines. Elara stared at her, aghast. A white vinyl fence for cattle. Do you have any idea what that would cost? What would happen? The first storm would knock it down, and the cows would be in your enclave, eating your petunias. Then you should have thought of that before the covenants were ratified, Brenda said smugly, making another note. Now, I need to inspect the livestock for compliance with the pet ordinance. There in the back pasture, Alara said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her lips. But you're welcome to take a look. Just be sure to close the gate behind you. All the gates. Brenda, flush with the thrill of bureaucratic conquest, barely heard the warning. She was already envisioning the headline in the HOA newsletter, President Lansing enforces standards. Thames recalcitrant farm. She strode past the main herd, noting their excessive numbers and unruly appearance on her clipboard. But it was the smaller, separate paddock closer to the woods that caught her eye. Inside was a single animal, unlike the others. This was Samson. Samson was Tom Buckley's pride and joy, a 2,000-pound Charolais bull with a pedigree longer than Brenda's list of violations. He was the color of fresh cream, with a massive sculpted head and a chest so broad it looked like a geological feature. He was usually a placid creature, spending his days chewing his cud and contemplating the profound simplicity of his existence. But he was a bull, a creature of immense power and a deeply ingrained sense of territory. And today he was in a mood. A low-fly population had been bothering him all morning, and the unfamiliar sharp scent of peppermint and self-righteousness was irritating his sensitive nostrils. Brenda approached the paddock. The fence here was stronger 5 strands of high-tensile wire. She peered through the wires, her clipboard held before her like a shield. "Oh my," she murmured, not with fear, but with delight. Violation L1, oversized, unneutered domestic animal. And L2, clearly not leashed. She unlatched the gate from the porch. Elara's eyes widened. "Brenda, don't you go in there. It's a compliance inspection," Brenda called back, stepping into the paddock and carefully latching the gate behind her. "I need to assess the animal's temperament and containment." Rule 14C subsection. She never finished the subsection. Samson lifted his great head. The peppermint smell was stronger now, offensive and chemical. This small, chattering creature in the blindingly white shirt had invaded his space. He let out a low, deep rumble, a sound that was less a warning and more a statement of tectonic shift. Brenda, for the first time, felt a flicker of unease. The animal was larger up close. Much larger. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath her feet. She held up her clipboard. "Shoo, go on, now." Samson didn't shoo. He took a step forward, his hooves sinking deep into the soft earth. His dark, liquid eyes fixed on the white blob of her blouse, which fluttered in the breeze. Brenda Elara's voice was sharp now, laced with genuine alarm. "Get out of the paddock. Right now, I am conducting an official HOA inspection," Brenda insisted, her voice losing its crispness, gaining a shrill edge. She waved the clipboard. "You bull sit. Stay." Samson interpreted the waving clipboard as a challenge. He lowered his head slightly, his wide, thick horns pointing in her direction. Another deep, guttural bellow rolled out of him, a sound that promised nothing good. The flicker of unease in Brenda's chest burst into full-blown panic. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The rules, the covenants, the violations, they all seemed to evaporate in the face of this primal reality. This wasn't a negotiation. This was biology. She took a stumbling step backward, her pristine sneaker sliding in a fresh, warm cow pie. A strangled squeak escaped her lips. She looked down in horror at the greenish-brown sludge now coating her shoe and splattering her khaki capris. The smell up close and personal was overwhelming. The peppermint oil was useless. Samson, seeing the retreat, saw weakness. He pawed at the ground, throwing up clods of dirt. The gesture was impossibly powerful, a prelude to a charge. Brenda dropped the clipboard. It landed face down in the dirt. She turned to run, but her manure-slicked shoe betrayed her. She fell hard, landing on her hands and knees in the mud. The white blouse was a lost cause. She scrambled back toward the gate, a desperate, crawling crab. She could feel the vibration of the bull's footsteps through the ground. She didn't dare look back. Elara was already at the main fence, a bucket of grain in her hand. She didn't open the paddock gate. That would have given Samson a clear path to a very panicked, very slow-moving target. Instead, she rattled the bucket and called his name in a firm, calm voice she used only for the livestock. "Samson, here, boy, breakfast." The bull stopped his advance. His ears twitched. The familiar sound of the grain bucket and Elara's voice cut through his irritation. The annoying peppermint-scented creature was retreating, and breakfast was being offered. It was a simple calculus. He gave one last, dismissive snort in Brenda's direction, then ambled towards Elara and the bucket. Brenda fumbled with the latch, her hands shaking so badly she could barely function. She finally yanked it open, fell through, and slammed it shut behind her. She collapsed against the outside of the fence, chest heaving, body trembling from head to toe. Her clothes were ruined, smeared with mud and manure. Her hair was a mess. Tears of terror, humiliation, and rage welled in her eyes. Elara waited until Samson was contentedly munching from the bucket before she walked over to the paddock fence. She looked down at the trembling, filthy form of the HOA president. "Brenda," Elara said, her voice quiet but carrying the full weight of the land she stood on. "This is a farm. That," she pointed a thumb at Samson, "is a bull. You don't measure them with a tape measure, you don't cite them with a clipboard, and you sure as hell don't tell them to sit and stay." Brenda could only sob a wet, hiccuping sound. Elara reached down, picked up the mud-caked clipboard. The pristine checklist was now a soggy, brown mess. She handed it back to Brenda. "I believe your inspection is over," Elara said. "Let me be perfectly clear. You will withdraw this covenant. You will leave my family, my farm, and my animals alone. If I get so much as a postcard from your HOA, the next thing I'll be sending you won't be a letter. It'll be a bill." Brenda looked up, her face a mask of confusion and snot. A bill. Elara nodded slowly. "For the trauma. My bull, Samson, is a purebred champion. His mental state is paramount to his performance. Your unauthorized and aggressive intrusion into his paddock has clearly caused him significant distress. I'll have to call the vet, get him checked out. That's not cheap. And the cleanup. She gestured to the manure on Brenda's clothes. That's premium organic fertilizer. You're wearing about $50 worth of it. Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The bureaucratic paradigm she lived by had been utterly destroyed, gored and trampled by a force of nature she couldn't comprehend. Now, Elara said, her tone final, I think you should go. You're upsetting the livestock. Brenda Lansing stumbled back to her Lexus, a broken woman. She didn't look back at the picturesque valley, the grazing cattle, or the stoic farmhouse. She only saw the massive, cream-colored bulk of the bull and the steady, unyielding gaze of the woman who commanded him. The next day, a formal letter arrived at the Buckley farm. It was on the same thick, cream-colored paper, but the tone was drastically different. It stated that, upon further legal review, the boundaries of the Oak Creek Valley HOA had been misinterpreted, and the Buckley property was hereby granted a permanent exemption from all covenants and restrictions. Elara read it and smiled. She took the letter out to the pasture where Samson was basking in the sun. She held it out to him. The bull gave it a curious sniff, then, with a flick of his massive tongue, he took the paper from her hand, chewed it thoughtfully a few times, and swallowed. Tom came up beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. Told you she'd see reason. Elara leaned into him, watching the bull. Some things, Tom, you just can't regulate. In the enclave, Brenda Lansing resigned as HOA president. Citing personal reasons, she never spoke of the incident again, though she developed a pronounced flinch at the smell of peppermint and a newfound fervent appreciation for vinyl fencing from a distance. And the Buckley farm continued its peaceful, productive existence, its borders respected, its boar content, a sovereign nation of dirt and duty in the heart of the ever-tiding world.